Athlete refuses treatment from obese doctor. Her next move leaves him speechless. The sterile smell of the hospital room was a stark contrast to the energy and adrenaline that usually defines Sarah Bennett's life. A professional athlete at the top of her game, Sarah had spent years building her reputation as a fierce competitor and a role model for discipline, strength, and perseverance. But now, as she sat on the examination table with her leg elevated, her patience was wearing thin. She had been sidelined for weeks after an unexpected injury during a high-profile competition. It wasn't the pain that bothered her. She was used to pushing through discomfort, but the uncertainty of how long she'd be off the field. Every day away from training felt like a missed opportunity to improve, and she was determined to get back to her peak as quickly as possible. The door to the exam room swung open, and in walked Dr. James Hollis. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and a large frame, wearing a crisp white coat that stretched tightly over his belly. Sarah's eyes widened slightly as she took in his appearance. Her immediate thought was blunt and unfiltered. He doesn't look like someone who should be giving health advice. Dr. Hollis didn't seem to notice her reaction. He offered a polite smile and extended a hand. "Good afternoon, Ms. Bennett. I've reviewed your X-rays and MRI results. Let's discuss your recovery plan." Sarah hesitated for a moment before shaking his hand. "Thanks," she said curtly, her tone betraying her skepticism. "But before we get into it, can I ask, do you specialize in sports medicine?" Dr. Hollis raised an eyebrow, clearly accustomed to the question. "I do," he replied evenly. "I've worked with athletes across various disciplines for over 20 years. Sarah nodded but couldn't help voicing what was on her mind. "No offense, but you don't really look like someone who understands what it takes to stay in peak condition." The room fell silent for a moment. Dr. Hollis's smile faltered, but he quickly regained his composure. "I understand your concern," he said calmly. "But appearances can be deceiving. My job isn't to compete alongside you, it's to help you recover and get back to doing what you do best." Sarah crossed her arms, clearly unconvinced. "I appreciate that, but I need someone who understands the kind of discipline and lifestyle I have. Someone who's aligned with that." Dr. Hollis's jaw tightened, but he maintained his professionalism. "Ms. Bennett, I assure you, my expertise isn't based on my physical condition. It's based on years of experience and training. Now, if you'd like to proceed, I can outline your treatment plan." Sarah hesitated. Part of her wanted to walk out and request another doctor, but another part of her, the part that had been raised to respect authority, decided to hear him out. "Fine," she said reluctantly. "Let's hear it." Dr. Hollis laid out a detailed plan for her recovery, a combination of physical therapy, modified training, and specific exercises to rebuild strength in her injured leg. He also emphasized the importance of rest and proper nutrition, noting that overtraining could delay her progress. As he spoke, Sarah found herself tuning out. She couldn't shake the thought that someone who didn't embody the principles he was preaching couldn't possibly understand the pressure she was under. By the time Dr. Hollis finished, Sarah's mind was already made up. "Thanks," she said flatly, standing up and grabbing her bag. "But I think I'll get a second opinion." Dr. Hollis's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of disappointment in his eyes. "That's your choice, Ms. Bennett," he said. "But remember, recovery isn't just about following a plan, it's about trusting the process and the people guiding you through it." Sarah didn't respond. She walked out of the room without looking back. Over the next week, Sarah met with 2 other doctors, both of whom echoed much of what Dr. Hollis had recommended. But she still wasn't satisfied. She threw herself into her own version of recovery, doubling down on her workouts and pushing her body to the limit. She was determined to prove that she could heal on her terms, without the guidance of someone she didn't respect. At first, her plan seemed to work. She felt stronger, more in control. But as the days turned into weeks, the pain in her leg worsened. Small tasks like climbing stairs or standing for long periods became excruciating, and her training sessions left her feeling drained and frustrated. One morning, after a particularly grueling workout, Sarah found herself sitting on the floor of her apartment, clutching her leg in agony. Tears of pain and frustration streamed down her face as she realized she couldn't keep ignoring the problem. She needed help. Reluctantly, Sarah returned to the hospital and scheduled another appointment with Dr. Hollis. When she walked into his office, he looked up from his desk, surprised but not unkind. "Ms. Bennett," he said, standing to greet her. "I wasn't expecting to see you again." Sarah shifted uncomfortably. "Yeah, well, I've been having some setbacks. I thought I could handle this on my own, but clearly I was wrong." Dr. Hollis nodded, his expression neutral. "I see. Let's take a look." As he examined her leg and reviewed her recent activity, his demeanor remained professional. He didn't lecture or chastise her for disregarding his advice. Instead, he focused on updating her treatment plan to account for the additional strain she had put on her body. When he finished, he looked at her directly. "Sarah," he said, dropping the formal tone, "I understand that you have high expectations for yourself and for those around you. But recovery isn't a competition. It's a partnership. If we're going to work together, I need you to trust me." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll do it your way." Over the next few weeks, Sarah committed to the plan Dr. Hollis had outlined. At first, it was difficult for her to let go of control and follow someone else's lead, but she quickly realized that his expertise was undeniable. The exercises he prescribed challenged her in ways she hadn't anticipated, and the physical therapy sessions were more intense than anything she had expected. But what surprised her most was Dr. Hollis's dedication. He checked in regularly, adjusted her plan as needed, and even attended a few of her therapy sessions to monitor her progress. Despite her initial judgment of him, she began to see that he genuinely cared about her recovery. One day, after a particularly successful session, Sarah found herself smiling for the first time in weeks. "You're good at this," she admitted as Dr. Hollis reviewed her progress notes. He chuckled. "Thanks. I try." Sarah hesitated, then said, "I think I owe you an apology. I judged you before I even gave you a chance, and that wasn't fair." Dr. Hollis looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "We all make judgments, Sarah. It's human nature. What matters is that we're willing to challenge them and grow from the experience." As Sarah's recovery continued, she began to see Dr. Hollis in a new light. He wasn't just her doctor. He was a mentor, someone who understood not just the mechanics of healing but the emotional toll it took. She learned about his own struggles with weight and health, how he had faced criticism and doubt but never let it stop him from pursuing his passion for medicine. Their conversations during her appointments became a source of inspiration for Sarah. She realized that strength came in many forms, and that true discipline wasn't about appearances, it was about perseverance, resilience, and the ability to adapt. By the time Sarah returned to the field, she was stronger than ever, not just physically, but mentally. Her experience with Dr. Hollis had taught her lessons she hadn't expected, and it changed the way she approached both her sport and her life. After her first competition back, where she secured a decisive victory, Sarah sought out Dr. Hollis to thank him. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said, shaking his hand. "Not just the recovery, you changed the way I see things." Dr. Hollis smiled. "You did the work, Sarah. I just helped guide you." As she walked away, Sarah couldn't help but feel grateful for the unexpected journey that had brought her here. Sometimes, the people we least expect can teach us the most important lessons. Sarah's return to competition wasn't just a triumph for her career, it was a testament to the transformation she had undergone during her recovery. But what stuck with her most wasn't the victory, it was the unexpected bond she had formed with Dr. Hollis. He had become more than just her doctor. He was a mentor who had reshaped her understanding of strength, discipline, and resilience. As the weeks went by, Sarah couldn't shake the idea that there was more she could do with the lessons she had learned. In her sport, she had seen countless athletes judged for their appearances, their struggles, or their perceived shortcomings. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that her journey with Dr. Hollis was a story worth sharing, not just to inspire others but to challenge the biases and assumptions that so often held people back. One afternoon, Sarah called her manager, Lisa, to pitch an idea. "I want to do a feature about recovery," she said. "Not just mine, but the people behind it, like Dr. Hollis." Lisa hesitated. "You mean the doctor you weren't too keen on at first?" "Exactly," Sarah said. "That's what makes it so important. I want to highlight how wrong I was to judge him based on his appearance and how much he taught me about resilience and expertise. Lisa was intrigued. That's a powerful angle. I can reach out to some media outlets and see if they're interested. Within days, Sarah's story began to take shape. A major sports network agreed to produce a documentary following her recovery journey, with a particular focus on the relationship between Sarah and Dr. Hollis. The project aimed to shed light on the often overlooked challenges of injury and rehabilitation, as well as the biases that athletes and professionals alike faced in their respective fields. When Sarah approached Dr. Hollis about the documentary, he was initially reluctant. "I'm not exactly camera material," he joked, gesturing to his round frame. "That's exactly why I want you to be part of this," Sarah said earnestly. "You've taught me so much, and I think your story could inspire so many people. Athletes, doctors, anyone who's ever felt judged or underestimated." Dr. Hollis hesitated, then nodded. "If it helps even one person, I'll do it." Filming began a few weeks later, and it was an emotional process for both Sarah and Dr. Hollis. The documentary captured the highs and lows of Sarah's recovery, from the pain and frustration of her early setbacks to the triumphant moments of progress. But it also delved into Dr. Hollis's background, revealing a side of him that few people had seen. Through candid interviews, Dr. Hollis opened up about his struggles with weight and self-esteem, his passion for medicine, and the countless times he had been dismissed or underestimated because of his appearance. He spoke about how those experiences had shaped his approach to patient care, making him more empathetic and determined to prove that expertise wasn't defined by a person's size or shape. For Sarah, hearing Dr. Hollis's story was a revelation. She realized how much strength it took to face the kind of judgment he had endured and how much courage it took to continue pursuing his calling in the face of adversity. As the documentary neared completion, Sarah and Dr. Hollis were invited to speak at a medical conference about their journey. The event was attended by hundreds of healthcare professionals, athletes, and advocates, all eager to hear their story. Standing on stage together, Sarah and Dr. Hollis shared their perspectives on recovery, resilience, and the power of challenging assumptions. Sarah spoke about the lessons she had learned from Dr. Hollis, emphasizing the importance of trusting expertise over appearances. "Dr. Hollis didn't just help me heal physically," she said. "He helped me grow as a person. He showed me that true strength isn't about how you look, it's about how you show up, how you persevere, and how you use your experiences to help others." When it was Dr. Hollis's turn to speak, he addressed the audience with a mix of humility and passion. As healthcare providers, we're not immune to judgment, whether it's from patients, colleagues, or even ourselves. But our job is to rise above it and focus on what matters, the well-being of the people we serve. Sarah's journey reminded me why I chose this path in the first place, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to share this experience with all of you. The audience erupted into applause, and as Sarah and Dr. Hollis stepped off the stage, they were met with a flurry of handshakes, hugs, and words of gratitude. When the documentary finally aired, it was met with overwhelming praise. Viewers were moved by the raw honesty of Sarah and Dr. Hollis's story, and many shared their own experiences of judgment and resilience. The documentary sparked important conversations about bias in both sports and medicine, and it inspired countless individuals to rethink their assumptions about others and themselves. Sarah received messages from athletes, healthcare providers, and everyday people who had been touched by the story. One message, in particular, stood out to her. It was from a young woman named Rachel, who was training to become a physical therapist. "I've always been self-conscious about my weight," Rachel wrote. "I worried that people wouldn't take me seriously as a healthcare professional because I didn't look the part. But your story reminded me that what matters most is my knowledge, my skills, and my compassion. Thank you for helping me believe in myself again." Sarah showed the message to Dr. Hollis, who smiled. "That's exactly why we did this," he said. The documentary's success opened new doors for both Sarah and Dr. Hollis. Sarah was invited to speak at events and workshops, not just about her athletic career but about the importance of mental strength, humility, and overcoming biases. Dr. Hollis, meanwhile, found himself in the spotlight as an advocate for more inclusive and compassionate healthcare practices. But despite their newfound fame, both of them remained grounded. Sarah continued to compete, balancing her training with her advocacy work, while Dr. Hollis returned to his practice, more committed than ever to his patients. One day, months after the documentary aired, Sarah received an invitation to attend an awards ceremony honoring individuals who had made significant contributions to the sports and medical communities. To her surprise, both she and Dr. Hollis were being recognized for their work. As they stood on stage together, accepting the award, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. What had started as a moment of doubt and judgment had grown into something far greater: a partnership, a friendship, and a movement that had touched lives around the world. In her acceptance speech, Sarah said, "This journey has taught me that the greatest lessons often come from the most unexpected places. Dr. Hollis showed me what it means to be strong, not just in body but in character. And for that, I will always be grateful." Dr. Hollis, in turn, thanked Sarah for her courage and humility. "Sarah reminded me that our greatest challenges can also be our greatest opportunities for growth. Together, we've proven that when we set aside judgment and work together, we can achieve incredible things." As the ceremony ended and they walked off the stage, Sarah turned to Dr. Hollis with a smile. "You know," she said, "I never thought I'd be standing here with you. But I'm glad I am." Dr. Hollis chuckled. "Life has a funny way of surprising us, doesn't it?" "Yeah," Sarah said, her voice thoughtful. "And I wouldn't have it any other way." The awards ceremony marked a turning point in both Sarah and Dr. Hollis's lives. While they had never intended to become symbols of resilience and transformation, their story had resonated with so many people that they couldn't ignore the opportunity to do more. Together, they decided to channel the momentum of their shared experience into something bigger. Over dinner a few days after the ceremony, Sarah brought up an idea. "What if we started a program?" she said, twirling her fork in her hand. "Something that combines recovery, mentorship, and breaking down stereotypes in sports and medicine." Dr. Hollis set down his glass, intrigued. "What kind of program?" Sarah leaned forward, her eyes alight with excitement. "Think about it. There are so many athletes who face judgment, whether it's about their bodies, their abilities, or their backgrounds. And there are just as many doctors and healthcare workers who are judged unfairly based on their appearance or personal struggles. What if we created a space where they could come together, support each other, and learn from one another?" Dr. Hollis nodded slowly. "A kind of mentorship and education initiative?" "Exactly," Sarah said. "We could offer workshops, one-on-one sessions, and even online resources. We could focus on recovery, resilience, and challenging biases, both internal and external." Dr. Hollis smiled. "I like it. It's ambitious, but it has the potential to make a real impact." They spent the rest of the evening brainstorming ideas, sketching out plans on napkins, and imagining what the program could become. By the time they parted ways, they were both buzzing with excitement. Over the next few months, Sarah and Dr. Hollis worked tirelessly to turn their vision into reality. They named the program Strength Beyond Stereotypes and began reaching out to their networks for support. Sarah contacted fellow athletes, coaches, and trainers, while Dr. Hollis reached out to medical professionals, educators, and advocacy groups. The response was overwhelming. People from all walks of life expressed interest in the program, eager to share their stories and contribute their expertise. Donations poured in, and soon they had the funding to launch their first pilot program. The inaugural event took place at a state-of-the-art sports and wellness center. Participants included athletes recovering from injuries, doctors and therapists from diverse backgrounds, and young students aspiring to careers in sports and medicine. The energy in the room was palpable as Sarah and Dr. Hollis took the stage to kick off the program. "Welcome, everyone," Sarah began, her voice steady and confident. "We're here because we believe in the power of resilience, not just physical resilience, but mental and emotional resilience, too. Each of us has faced challenges, whether it's recovering from an injury, overcoming biases, or navigating self-doubt. This program is about turning those challenges into opportunities for growth." Dr. Hollis stepped forward, his calm demeanor grounding the room. "As healthcare professionals, athletes, and individuals, we often face judgments based on how we look or what people assume about us. But our worth isn't defined by those judgments. It's defined by our actions, our dedication, and our ability to lift each other up. That's what this program is about. The room erupted into applause, and the program was officially underway. The first few days of Strength Beyond Stereotypes were filled with workshops, panel discussions, and hands-on activities. Participants shared their stories in small groups, creating a space of trust and vulnerability. Sarah led a session on mental toughness, sharing how her journey with Dr. Hollis had taught her to rethink her definition of strength. "I used to think that strength meant never showing weakness," she said, standing in front of a group of young athletes. "But I've learned that true strength comes from being honest with yourself, asking for help when you need it, and trusting the people who are there to support you." One of the athletes, a college basketball player named Jordan, raised his hand. "How do you deal with people who doubt you?" he asked. Sarah smiled. "By proving them wrong, not out of spite, but because you know your worth. And sometimes, proving them wrong means not letting their opinions affect you in the first place. Focus on what you can control, your effort, your mindset, and your growth." In another session, Dr. Hollis spoke about the importance of empathy in healthcare. "Every patient is unique," he said. "Our job isn't just to treat their symptoms, it's to understand their story. That's how we build trust and create real, lasting change." A young medical student named Priya raised her hand. "How do you handle it when patients judge you before they even get to know you?" Dr. Hollis paused, his expression thoughtful. "It's not easy," he admitted. "But I remind myself that their judgment often comes from fear or frustration, not malice. I focus on showing them through my actions that I'm here to help, no matter what." As the program continued, something incredible began to happen. The athletes and healthcare professionals started to see each other in a new light. The athletes realized that doctors and therapists weren't just authority figures, they were people with their own struggles and strengths. And the healthcare professionals gained a deeper appreciation for the mental and physical challenges athletes faced. By the end of the week, the participants had formed a tight-knit community. They exchanged contact information, promised to keep in touch, and shared their excitement about the future of the program. At the closing ceremony, Sarah and Dr. Hollis stood before the group, overwhelmed by the success of the event. "This week has been more than we could have ever hoped for," Sarah said, her voice filled with emotion. "You've shown us what's possible when we come together, support each other, and challenge the stereotypes that hold us back. This is just the beginning." Dr. Hollis nodded. "Each of you is proof that strength comes in many forms. Keep carrying that message with you, and know that you're part of a movement that's bigger than all of us." The success of the pilot program led to the rapid expansion of Strength Beyond Stereotypes. Within a year, Sarah and Dr. Hollis had hosted similar events in cities across the country, reaching thousands of participants. The program gained national recognition, and both Sarah and Dr. Hollis were invited to share their story on major platforms, from talk shows to academic conferences. But despite their growing fame, they remained focused on the mission. For Sarah, that meant continuing to compete and use her platform to advocate for change. For Dr. Hollis, it meant balancing his practice with his work for the program, ensuring that every patient received the care and compassion they deserved. One evening, after a long day of planning their next event, Sarah and Dr. Hollis sat on the porch of a small inn near the venue. The stars were bright, and the air was cool and crisp. "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" Sarah asked, leaning back in her chair. Dr. Hollis chuckled. "Not in a million years. But I'm glad we did." Sarah smiled. "Me too. You've taught me so much, not just about recovery, but about what it means to really connect with people. And you've reminded me why I do what I do," Dr. Hollis said. "It's not just about fixing injuries or prescribing treatments. It's about helping people see their own potential." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars. In that moment, they both knew that their journey, unexpected and challenging as it had been, was far from over. There were still more stories to share, more lives to touch, and more stereotypes to shatter. And they were ready for whatever came next. The rapid growth of Strength Beyond Stereotypes had transformed it into a national movement. Every event brought new faces, fresh ideas, and more opportunities to challenge long-held biases in both sports and healthcare. Sarah and Dr. Hollis, once two individuals with a tenuous connection, had become the driving forces behind a cause that was breaking barriers across industries. As the movement grew, they faced new challenges. Expanding to more cities required resources, partnerships, and relentless planning. There were moments of frustration, times when funding was tight or when they faced resistance from institutions reluctant to embrace change. But through it all, they reminded each other of the purpose that had brought them together. One of the most ambitious projects they undertook was creating a documentary series that chronicled the stories of individuals who had been impacted by the program. The series, titled Redefining Strength, aimed to amplify the voices of athletes, healthcare professionals, and everyday people who had overcome judgment and adversity. The first episode focused on Jordan, the college basketball player Sarah had mentored during the pilot program. When filming began, Jordan admitted that he had struggled with self-doubt for most of his life. "People always told me I wasn't tall enough to play basketball at a high level," he said, his voice tinged with emotion. "Even when I made the team, I felt like I didn't belong." Through the program, Jordan had not only gained confidence but had also discovered a passion for mentoring younger athletes. The documentary captured him coaching a group of middle school students, sharing the lessons he had learned about perseverance and self-belief. "They need to know they're enough," Jordan said during one of the interviews. "Just as they are." The episode resonated deeply with viewers, sparking conversations about the pressures athletes faced and the importance of mentorship. Sarah and Dr. Hollis were thrilled with the response and quickly began production on additional episodes. As the series gained traction, Sarah and Dr. Hollis were invited to speak at the annual Sports and Health Summit, a prestigious event attended by leaders from around the world. The summit's theme that year was Breaking Barriers, and their work was seen as a prime example of the impact individuals could have when they challenged societal norms. Standing on the massive stage in front of thousands of attendees, Sarah and Dr. Hollis felt a mix of nerves and pride. They had come a long way from their initial meeting in that small exam room, and now their story was inspiring change on a global scale. "This journey has been about more than just recovery," Sarah began, her voice clear and confident. "It's been about redefining what it means to be strong. Strength isn't about perfection. It's about resilience, growth, and the willingness to challenge the way things have always been." Dr. Hollis stepped forward, his presence commanding but approachable. "In healthcare, we often talk about treating the body. But true healing involves more than that. It's about addressing the mind, the spirit, and the biases that can hold us back. Programs like Strength Beyond Stereotypes remind us that everyone deserves to be seen and valued for who they are." The audience erupted into applause, and as Sarah and Dr. Hollis walked off the stage, they were met with a flood of handshakes and words of gratitude from attendees inspired by their work. Back at home, Sarah found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed since the injury that had initially brought her to Dr. Hollis's office. She had grown not just as an athlete but as a person, learning to value collaboration, humility, and empathy in ways she never had before. One evening, while scrolling through emails, she came across a message from a high school track coach in Texas. The coach explained that one of her athletes, a girl named Layla, had been struggling with confidence after an injury. Layla had watched Redefining Strength and had been particularly moved by Sarah's story. "She said you inspired her to keep going," the coach wrote. "I just wanted to thank you for sharing your journey. It's made a world of difference for her." Sarah immediately wrote back, offering to video call Layla and talk to her directly. When they connected a few days later, Layla's eyes lit up as soon as Sarah appeared on the screen. "I can't believe I'm talking to you," Layla said, her excitement palpable. Sarah smiled warmly. "It's so great to meet you, Layla. Your coach told me you've been working hard on your recovery. How's it going?" Layla hesitated, then admitted, "It's been tough. Sometimes I feel like I'll never get back to where I was." "I know exactly how you feel," Sarah said. "But let me tell you something. Recovery isn't a straight line. It's full of ups and downs, and that's okay. What matters is that you keep showing up, even when it's hard. You've got this." By the end of the call, Layla looked visibly more confident. Sarah hung up feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Moments like these reminded her why she had started this journey in the first place. Meanwhile, Dr. Hollis was experiencing his own transformations. For years, he had avoided social media, wary of the judgment and negativity that often came with it. But after the success of redefining strength, he decided to join the conversation, creating a platform where he could share advice, stories, and encouragement. To his surprise, his account quickly gained a following. People from all over the world sent messages thanking him for his honesty and wisdom. One message in particular stood out. It was from a young medical student who struggled with imposter syndrome. Dr. Hollis, the student wrote, "I've always felt like I didn't belong in med school because of my weight. Seeing you succeed as a doctor has given me hope that I can do it too. Thank you for being an inspiration." Dr. Hollis replied immediately, offering words of encouragement and advice. He was humbled by the impact his story was having and resolved to use his platform to support as many people as possible. As the months turned into years, Strength Beyond Stereotypes continued to expand. New chapters were established in countries around the world, each one tailored to address the unique challenges faced by local communities. Sarah and Dr. Hollis traveled extensively, meeting with participants, hosting events, and building a network of advocates who shared their vision. But despite their busy schedules, they never lost sight of the personal connections that had fueled their work from the beginning. They made time to mentor individuals, celebrate small victories, and reflect on how far they had come. One evening, as they sat together after a long day of planning, Sarah turned to Dr. Hollis with a thoughtful expression. "Did you ever think we'd get here?" she asked, gesturing to the bustling activity around them. Dr. Hollis chuckled. "Not in my wildest dreams. But I wouldn't trade it for anything." Sarah smiled. "Me neither. You've taught me so much, James. Not just about recovery, but about seeing people for who they really are. And you've reminded me why I started this work in the first place," Dr. Hollis replied. "It's about making a difference. One person, one story, one step at a time." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as participants mingled, shared stories, and built connections. In that moment, they knew that their journey, while challenging and unexpected, had been worth every step. The legacy of Strength Beyond Stereotypes was far-reaching. Athletes, healthcare professionals, and everyday individuals who had once felt invisible now had a platform to share their voices. And as Sarah and Dr. Hollis continued to lead the movement, they remained committed to their mission, breaking down barriers, challenging stereotypes, and reminding the world that true strength came from within. As Strength Beyond Stereotypes grew into a global phenomenon, it became more than just a program. It became a symbol of hope for anyone who had ever been judged or underestimated. The initiative's impact stretched across borders, industries, and generations. Its ripple effects were being felt in schools, hospitals, athletic organizations, and beyond. Sarah and Dr. Hollis found themselves busier than ever, juggling speaking engagements, mentoring sessions, and overseeing the growing network of chapters. Yet, they both knew that with growth came challenges, and those challenges would test their resolve in ways they hadn't anticipated. One of the first major hurdles came when a high-profile athletic organization invited Sarah and Dr. Hollis to partner with them for a public campaign promoting inclusivity in sports. At first, the opportunity seemed like a perfect fit. The organization promised funding, media coverage, and access to a wide audience. However, as the negotiations progressed, Sarah and Dr. Hollis began to notice discrepancies between the organization's public statements and its internal practices. During a meeting with the organization's leadership, Sarah raised concerns about reports of discriminatory practices within their coaching staff. "If we're going to partner with you, we need to ensure that your values align with ours," she said firmly. "Inclusivity can't just be a marketing slogan. It has to be reflected in your actions." The room fell silent, and the CEO of the organization, a polished man with a confident smile, responded dismissively. "We're already doing plenty to promote diversity," he said. "This partnership will help reinforce that message. Let's focus on the positives." Dr. Hollis exchanged a glance with Sarah, both of them sensing the reluctance to address the deeper issues. After the meeting, they discussed their next steps. "We can't compromise our values," Sarah said. "If we align ourselves with them without real change, we're undermining everything we've worked for." Dr. Hollis nodded. Agreed. But we also have an opportunity to push for accountability. Let's see if they're willing to meet us halfway. Sarah and Dr. Hollis drafted a detailed proposal outlining the changes they wanted to see, including mandatory bias training for staff, a transparent reporting system for discrimination, and a commitment to hiring a more diverse leadership team. The organization balked at first, but after public pressure and media attention, they eventually agreed to implement the changes. The partnership moved forward, but only on Sarah and Dr. Hollis's terms. It became a testament to their commitment to integrity and their refusal to compromise on the mission of strength beyond stereotypes. As the years went by, the program's success inspired other industries to take notice. Healthcare organizations began adopting similar initiatives to address biases among medical professionals, while schools introduced programs to combat stereotypes in the classroom. Sarah and Dr. Hollis were frequently invited to consult on these projects, and their insights helped shape policies and practices across multiple sectors. One memorable project took them to a small rural community where access to healthcare and education was severely limited. The town's only clinic was understaffed and underfunded, and many residents had given up on seeking medical care altogether. When Sarah and Dr. Hollis arrived, they were struck by the resilience of the community but also by the barriers that had been holding them back. Dr. Hollis worked closely with the clinic's staff to implement training programs that emphasized empathy and cultural competence. Meanwhile, Sarah partnered with local schools to create mentorship opportunities for students interested in pursuing careers in healthcare and sports. During one of their visits, they met a young boy named Luis, who dreamed of becoming a doctor. Despite his family's financial struggles, Luis was determined to succeed. He spent hours studying with borrowed textbooks and often stayed after school to ask his teachers for extra help. When Sarah and Dr. Hollis learned about Luis's aspirations, they made it their mission to support him. They connected him with scholarships, mentorship programs, and resources to help him on his journey. Years later, Luis would graduate from medical school and return to his hometown as the clinic's first full-time doctor. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the newly expanded clinic, Luis spoke about the impact Sarah and Dr. Hollis had on his life. They didn't just give me opportunities, they believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Their support changed my life, and now I want to do the same for others. Meanwhile, Sarah's personal journey continued to evolve. Although her athletic career had slowed down, she found new ways to stay connected to the world of sports. She became a commentator for major competitions, sharing her insights and advocating for greater inclusivity in broadcasting. She also wrote a memoir, Beyond the Finish Line, which became a bestseller and further amplified the message of strength beyond stereotypes. Dr. Hollis, too, embraced new challenges. He began teaching at a medical school, where he quickly became a favorite among students for his engaging lectures and compassionate approach. He often shared his own experiences with judgment and resilience, encouraging his students to see beyond the surface and connect with their patients on a deeper level. During one lecture, a student asked, "Dr. Hollis, what's the most important lesson you've learned in your career?" He paused for a moment, then smiled. "That everyone has a story. And if you take the time to listen, you'll find that their story is often more powerful than you ever imagined." Despite their busy schedules, Sarah and Dr. Hollis made it a point to reconnect regularly. Whether it was over dinner, during planning sessions, or at program events, they always found time to reflect on their journey and the impact they were making. One evening, as they sat on the porch of a lodge during a retreat for program leaders, Sarah turned to Dr. Hollis with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about how all of this started?" she asked. "How one moment in that exam room led to everything we've built?" Dr. Hollis chuckled. "All the time. It's funny how life works, isn't it? One moment of doubt, one decision to keep going, and suddenly, everything changes." Sarah nodded. "It makes me think about how many other stories are out there, waiting to be told. How many people are facing their own challenges, just like we were." Dr. Hollis smiled. "And that's why we keep going. Because every time we share our story, we give someone else the courage to write theirs." As the movement entered its second decade, Strength Beyond Stereotypes reached a milestone. Its 1000th chapter was established in a small city in Southeast Asia. To celebrate, Sarah and Dr. Hollis traveled there to meet the local team and attend the launch event. The event was a vibrant celebration of diversity and resilience, featuring performances, speeches, and stories from participants whose lives had been transformed by the program. As Sarah and Dr. Hollis took the stage to address the crowd, they were overwhelmed by the energy and enthusiasm of the audience. "This movement isn't about us," Sarah said, her voice steady and heartfelt. "It's about all of you, the people who have embraced this mission and made it your own. Together, we've proven that strength isn't limited by stereotypes. It's limitless and it belongs to everyone." Dr. Hollis stepped forward, his words carrying the weight of years of experience. "Every time we challenge a bias, every time we lift someone up, we're creating a ripple effect. And those ripples will continue long after we're gone. That's the power of this movement." The crowd erupted into applause, and as Sarah and Dr. Hollis stepped off the stage, they knew they had created something that would endure for generations to come. Back in their hotel that evening, Sarah and Dr. Hollis sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. They talked about the future, about the challenges that still lay ahead and the opportunities to make an even greater impact. "We've come a long way," Sarah said. "But there's still so much more to do." Dr. Hollis nodded. "And we'll keep doing it. One story, one person, one step at a time." As the night grew quiet, they both felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Their journey, unexpected and transformative, had not only changed their lives but had also inspired countless others to believe in themselves and in each other. And in that moment, they knew they were exactly where they were meant to be. As strength beyond stereotypes grew into an even more powerful movement, Sarah and Dr. Hollis realized they had created something that had outpaced even their most ambitious dreams. The 1000th chapter celebration in Southeast Asia marked not just a milestone but also a turning point. The movement was no longer theirs alone. It now belonged to a global community of people committed to shattering biases and lifting each other up. But with growth came new challenges. The expansion of strength beyond stereotypes brought logistical complexities. While every chapter was built on the same foundational principles, each region faced unique social, cultural, and economic challenges. What worked in urban schools in New York City wouldn't necessarily apply to rural villages in Africa or underserved communities in South America. Sarah and Dr. Hollis found themselves balancing the need for consistency with the importance of local adaptability. One of the biggest challenges came when a newly established chapter in a conservative region of Eastern Europe faced backlash. Local leaders accused the program of promoting radical ideas and undermining traditional values. Social media campaigns attacked the chapter leaders, and several sponsors pulled their funding under pressure. When Sarah and Dr. Hollis heard about the situation, they immediately organized a meeting with the local chapter leaders to strategize. "First and foremost, we support you," Sarah said during the virtual meeting. "You're not alone in this." Dr. Hollis added, "It's important to remember that change often meets resistance. That doesn't mean we stop, it means we adapt. How can we work together to address these concerns and keep moving forward?" The local leaders suggested hosting community forums to explain the program's goals and address misconceptions. They also proposed highlighting success stories from other chapters to show the program's positive impact. With Sarah and Dr. Hollis's support, the chapter leaders launched a grassroots campaign to rebuild trust. Over time, the forums and success stories helped change perceptions, and the program began to gain acceptance. It was a hard-fought victory, but it reinforced the importance of cultural sensitivity and community engagement. While navigating the challenges of expansion, Sarah began to feel a growing desire to reconnect with her roots. For years, she had been the public face of the movement, traveling constantly and working tirelessly to promote its mission. But in the quiet moments between meetings and events, she realized how much she missed being an athlete. One evening, as she sat on the porch of her childhood home during a rare visit, she found herself thinking about the thrill of competition, the adrenaline, the focus, the sense of purpose. She wondered if there was a way to combine her love of sports with her advocacy work. A few weeks later, Sarah announced that she was launching an annual international competition called the Resilience Games. The event would bring together athletes from diverse backgrounds to celebrate not just their physical abilities but also their stories of overcoming adversity. The games would include traditional sports as well as unique challenges that emphasize teamwork, mental toughness, and creative problem-solving. I want these games to be a platform for people who might never have had a chance to compete otherwise, Sarah said during the launch announcement. This isn't just about winning, it's about celebrating resilience in all its forms. The first Resilience Games were held in Los Angeles and attracted participants from over 30 countries. The event was a resounding success, with athletes sharing their stories on a global stage and inspiring millions. For Sarah, it was a chance to reconnect with her athletic roots while continuing to advance the mission of strength beyond stereotypes. While Sarah focused on the Resilience Games, Dr. Hollis found himself reflecting on his own path. For years, he had dedicated himself to helping others, often at the expense of his own well-being. But as he saw the movement flourishing, he realized it was time to address some of his own challenges. One day, during a quiet moment at home, Dr. Hollis looked in the mirror and saw a man who had poured his heart and soul into his work but had neglected his own health. He decided it was time to make a change, not because of societal expectations, but because he wanted to be the best version of himself for his patients, his students, and himself. He started small, incorporating more movement into his daily routine and working with a nutritionist to develop healthier eating habits. True to his character, Dr. Hollis approached the process with humility and patience, sharing his journey openly with his social media followers. "This isn't about becoming someone else," he wrote in one post. "It's about taking care of the person I already am." His honesty and vulnerability resonated with people around the world, many of whom were inspired to embark on their own journeys of self-care. Dr. Hollis's transformation wasn't just physical, it was a testament to his belief in the power of resilience and the importance of embracing one's own story. As Sarah and Dr. Hollis continued their work, they began to focus on mentoring the next generation of leaders. They knew that for the movement to thrive, it needed fresh perspectives and new voices. They started a fellowship program within Strength Beyond Stereotypes, offering training, resources, and funding to young leaders who wanted to create change in their communities. One of the first fellows was Maya, a college student from India who had been inspired by the program's work. Maya had faced significant obstacles as a young woman pursuing a career in engineering, including discrimination and a lack of support. But through the fellowship, she gained the tools and confidence to launch her own initiative, a mentorship program for girls in STEM. Maya's program quickly gained traction, and within a year, she had helped dozens of young women secure internships, scholarships, and opportunities in STEM fields. During a fellowship gathering, Maya stood on stage and addressed Sarah and Dr. Hollis directly. "You showed me what was possible," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "And now I want to do the same for others. Thank you for believing in me." As the years passed, Sarah and Dr. Hollis began to think about their legacy. They knew they wouldn't be able to lead the movement forever, but they were determined to ensure that its impact would endure. They established the Strength Beyond Stereotypes Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting the program's chapters, funding new initiatives, and advancing research on bias and resilience. The foundation also created an endowment to provide long-term financial stability, ensuring that the movement could continue to grow for generations to come. At the foundation's launch event, Sarah and Dr. Hollis stood before a crowd of supporters, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. "This movement started with a single conversation," Sarah said. "It grew because of the people who believed in it, who shared their stories, and who refused to accept the limitations placed on them. This foundation is for all of you, and for everyone who will carry this mission forward." Dr. Hollis added, "Strength isn't just about what we achieve in our lifetime. It's about the impact we leave behind. Together, we've built something that will continue to change lives long after we're gone." In the years that followed, Sarah and Dr. Hollis gradually stepped back from their day-to-day roles, passing the torch to a new generation of leaders. But their influence was still felt in every chapter, every initiative, and every story that emerged from the movement they had built. Sarah continued to organize the Resilience Games, which had become a global phenomenon, and wrote a second book about her experiences. Dr. Hollis focused on teaching and mentoring, using his platform to inspire the next wave of compassionate and inclusive healthcare professionals. Every now and then, they would reconnect, sometimes at an event, sometimes over a quiet dinner, to reflect on the journey they had shared. And each time, they would marvel at how far they had come, from that initial meeting in the exam room to a movement that had touched millions of lives. As they looked ahead, they knew that the story of strength beyond stereotypes was far from over. It would continue to evolve, grow, and inspire, driven by the belief that true strength lies not in how we look, but in how we lift each other up.